there is a dash dash.
Okay, okay.
Now,
This
with
is
the
the
dash dash graph, you have to put a host name, right? Let's try all. The thing is wrong in your inventory as well. Why are you having routers here? Why are you having firewalls? You just have to create the one which is given in the guided exercise, nothing else.
okay.
See, what I show you, those are demos. You don't have to perform any of that. Anything else will fail, right? So don't follow the way I am teaching because those are the ways we perform to explain it to the students. But
Okay.
a student only has to perform the guided exercise. Anything outside of the guided exercise might end up failing in your class. Remember that.
Okay. Okay.
There you go.
Okay. Got it. Okay.
Okay, so I hope guys, all of you have performed the guided exercise. Okay, so guys, one very important note about the class. Remember, the things which I'm showing are going to be the demonstrations. I know the product more than enough to create a custom thing in the class, if it is a possibility. What happens is, if we, if you guys do anything which is outside of this course during the class, it might break it. So remember, give priority to only perform the guided exercise, literally every single word exactly the same way. If there are changes, you let me know. If you want to do something custom, I might be able to help you out on how to achieve something. Okay? Okay? So just perform the guided exercises. Okay. So guys, now the next thing which we are going to do is going to be the configuration file. Okay, so here we will be discussing about how we can create an Ansible configuration file. We will be describing what are the places. Just 1 second, guys. Okay, so now we'll be talking about the configuration file, the precedences, the configurations which we define inside that. And let's go ahead and see this. So first of all, what is a configuration file and why do we need it? An answer to that question is the most easiest thing. Okay, so Ansible configuration file here. So guys, the default configuration file is located at etc Ansible ansible.cfg, and this file is written in ini format. Okay, so let me show you the default configuration file. So etc Ansible ansible.cfg. So take a look. This is the configuration file. So if you'll notice, just like the inventory file, we also have the groups over here. Though the technical word over here is not groups, this is what we call a section. This is the actual technical word in the INI format, a section, that this is a section. And each section contains some default configuration. Now remember, Ansible has everything, every single configuration configured as a default configuration in each of the section. So the only lines which are not commented are the section names. Every single other configuration in the entire file is commented out. Means those are the default configuration. Okay. Now, in order for you to modify, the way you can do that is you have to create another file at another place and create a new section, define the settings which you want, and Ansible will apply those settings. Now, let's say there are 400 settings and you wrote only 10 settings. So remaining 390 settings, Ansible will be gathering that data using that configuration as the default one. So whatever you configure will be taken. Whatever you don't configure will be taken from defaults. Okay. So Ansible doesn't recommend you to modify the default configuration file like ever, because if you delete something from this, the entry will not be present anywhere else. So Ansible says that developers of Ansible said that you should create a different configuration file at a different level. Those are in the home directory of the user, a hidden file A hidden file in a Linux machine is represented with a dot in front. A hidden file in the home directory, .ansible.cfg. Now, this is generally used by those people who are only automating one type of automation at a time, on one platform, maybe only on one kind of playbook with one kind of configuration. But when people have different projects to work on, which might require different types of settings, the recommendation is that you must have a project directory. And inside that project directory, where you will have your inventory, where you'll have your playbook, you should also have your ansible.cfg there. This one is recommended. So whenever you create a project directory, that is where you should create your ansible.cfg. Though there is a highest precedence, which is a bash environment variable, it is ansible_config. Okay, and the precedence works this way. If you have this file available and whatever configuration you have defined over there, it will overwrite this. If you have this, it will overwrite both from below. If you have this, it will overwrite all the ones before. So because this is recommended, we always create a ansible.cfg in our project directory and nowhere else. And we put all the configuration there. Whatever configuration we define over there will be taken. Whatever we don't will not be read from the previous file. Ansible only reads one configuration file at a time. And whatever is not defined will be considered from the default settings. Remember. So my current working directory is my home directory. Here my inventory file is. So the way we can also create a configuration file right here for now. And remember, though this is my home directory, I don't want to be on this level. I am not creating this level, okay? This is a hidden file. I'm considering home directory as my project directory, and I'm just creating a normal ansible.cfg. Okay, so I will create an ansible.cfg over here. Remember, the file name should be ansible.cfg and nothing else. Open it. Now you can define your settings over here. Now, when we talk about the settings, okay, which settings would you define? That matters a lot. But before we go to the settings, some recommended practices. One, if you upload your project to a version control repository like Git, you can upload the configuration file without any issue. Okay. And second recommendation is to always define the inventory file path in the configuration file itself. We will define that in a minute. Now, how do I know which configuration file Ansible is reading right now? Okay, I have saved an empty file right now. So to check that, we can run ansible -- version, and Ansible will tell which configuration file it is reading right now. Ansible is reading etc ansible ansible.cfg as of now. Okay. Now, if I save even the empty file, see, I have saved the empty file this time. And when I'm doing ansible -- did it save or not? Okay, from ansible.cfg. Do I have the file? Okay, now I have the file. If I do ansible -- version, take a look. Ansible automatically figured out that it has to use this file. Okay, so this is how this works. Now, which configuration settings will you really define? But before we even know the settings, we do need to know the sections, right? How many sections are there in the configuration files? And then we should explore the settings inside those sections. So I will grep anything which starts with starting bracket from etc ansible ansible.cfg. Remember, all the section name starts with the big brackets like this. And you see there are 10 sections. there is a defaults, which will contain all the default settings, like what is the path of the inventory file, what is the remote user do you want to work with, etc. Then we have got our inventory. Inventory is the section where we enable the inventory plugins. Privilege escalation. Generally, if we log into a remote user which has less privileges, then how do we escalate privilege? So that is this section. Paramiko and SH connection, these two are the section which defines the setting for the Linux-based SSH connection. So these two are the Linux host connections. That is where we define the Paramiko and SSH connection setting. Persistent connection is all about defining the connection state, that for how long the connection should be valid, when the connection should be demolished, what is the connect timeout, what is the command timeout, those kind of things are defined in the persistent connection. Now, accelerate, though it is a section right now, but it is completely outdated. Accelerate was a feature in Ansible until Ansible 2.2. And starting 2.3, they introduced a new feature, but currently this functionality has not been removed yet. So you can ignore this. This functionality is kind of deprecated, you can say. Then we have got SLNX. This is generally used for file operations on a Linux host. Colors to define what color output you will see whenever you run anything with Ansible. And diff is to enable the diff mode when you perform some operations. In a config file, generally you define only 3 sections, at least for network automation. Defaults, privilege escalation, and persistent connection. These are the only 3 sections that you define. And in the defaults, you define the remote user, transport method, should it ask the password or not, what is the value for the host key checking, and what is the value of the inventory file at its core. Okay. In privilege escalation, you can generally define become method, become user, become ask pass. Now in persistent connection, you generally define 3 things, which is command timeout, connect timeout, and connect retry timeout. Okay. So let's try to understand these settings. Now, in the default section, remote user defines that to which user do you want to log in when you log in into the remote host. So guys, do you have the same user on every single host, or do you have different user on different hosts to log in, or different types of platforms? Like on Cisco, you have a different host, on Juniper, you have a different host, like that. What do you have in your environment?
Rajat, I think that depends upon the architectural that we have taken into consideration. So there are
Right.
situations when across different vendors you have different type of usernames, but there are situations when you can have the same ones as well.
Exactly.
So
So that depends
if you
on
can,
the
yeah,
situation. Completely
yes,
depends on the architecture, which I completely agree. But right now, as you said, depends on the architecture. So let's say the current architecture in your organization. Does it allows you to have the same use? Sorry, let me rephrase the question. Do you have different users or not? In simple words, a yes or a no question.
No, we have
no,
single user, which is
Single
integrated
user.
with our AD,
Sorry,
which is integrated with our AD actually. Packets
got
included
it.
with the radius. Yeah,
Got it. Got it.
but
On the network
Rajat,
device, just one question. On the network device,
yeah,
integrated with AD.
yeah. Our packets is integrated with the radius server, and radius is integrated with the AD
No,
actually.
oh, my
So
bad.
which,
I heard AD, not radius. My bad.
oh yeah,
I was thinking more of the Active Directory rather than the radius. So my bad. Yes, I completely understand now what kind of environment do you have. So you have a centralized platform, which is radius, where all the users and the passwords are getting authenticated from. Am I correct over here?
Yes.
And all of the network devices are integrated with this Radius server that whenever a user logs in, go to Radius server for the authentication verification, correct?
Yes.
Exactly. Now, if you have the same user on every single host of yours, it is easy to just define right here, right here. But if you have a different user on all the different hosts or all the different types of platforms, then this is not the recommended place. Okay? Is it clarified that what do we use remote user for?
But Rajat, just a question that suppose
Hmm?
the situation which TechX is about, that we have a common set of username, okay?
Hmm?
For that, this particular configuration runs fine, and it is acceptable. But
Right.
suppose my users across different vendors are different.
Exactly. In that case, this is not recommended. This will not work.
Yeah. So I mean, what do you suggest for that case?
We will cover that in some time, but just to answer your question right now, in that case, all the usernames are defined as a group variable inside your inventory or outside your inventory.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Okay. So we will see
Yeah.
that in a few minutes because in this classroom, our Cisco device have a different user and our BIOS device have a different user. So we do have to define that somewhere, right?
Yes.
So we will practically see that today.
Okay. Okay. Perfect.
Okay. So what I'm trying to say is if you have a single user throughout your architecture, this is the right place to define that user. Okay. If you have a different users, simply remove this configuration. Okay. Do not even have this because this is not the right place in that case. Where do you define though? I'll cover that in a few minutes. Now, second is transport. Transport here defines the type of connection on a Linux machine. Okay, sorry, on a network automation, in this case of a network automation, you have to define the type of connection. On a network automation use case, we have three types of connection. So types of connection for network devices. Okay, do you guys have SSH enabled on your network devices to SSH into the device and do all the job inside?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Right. So that is one type of a connection. And in Ansible, we call that type of connection called network underscore CLI. Okay. So this is your normal SSH using CLI. Okay. Now, have you guys heard about netconf connection?
Yes.
Right. What is a netconf connection, guys? Sends RPC call over a XML in the XML format, correct?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Makes RCP calls using XML format. So now, tell me one thing, guys. Does every single network device out there supports netconf or understands netconf or not?
I think no.
Exactly, and you're correct 100% there. Cisco created netconf. I think I could be wrong, but Cisco devices supports netconf. Not all of them, but many of them. Juniper devices, many of the Juniper devices does support netconf. But if you really see F5, they don't. F5 or checkpoint, I think I am messing up over there. But every single network device does not support netconf. So netconf is more reliable though. It provides you a static connection. It puts less overhead on the network, on the number of calls or number of connections it makes, but it is not supported everywhere. This does. And the third type of a connection is HTTP API. Generally, making API calls over HTTP. So, have you guys used like the latest technologies like Cisco's Meraki? or any other latest technologies which only has the GUI, like Cisco
SDN,
Apex?
Cisco Viptela.
Yeah, Viptela is a good option. So Viptela only has a GUI for you to work with, correct?
Correct.
So how do you make API calls with that? And that is where HTTP API comes into the picture. Does it make sense, guys? So these are the types of connection. So when we talk about the most used type of connection for network devices, it is network underscore CLI. To make SSH calls, to make the SSH connection over the CLI, we use the network CLI. So you can define the connection type over here. Again, if every single of your device throughout your organization supports a single connection, this is the best place. But if you're using different types of connections, then this is not the right place, and then you should define it with a variable. And how do you define that? We will learn it later. Does this make sense? What is a transport, guys?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, whenever you make a connection, does it ask you a password or does it provide you a passwordless login in your organization?
Ask for password.
Exactly.
Ask for password.
And that is where AskPass comes in. Generally, on a Linux host, you can do passwordless connection. On a network device, I won't say it is impossible, but it is not used that extensively as we do it in a Linux environment, right? So AskPass defines, should I ask the password while making the connection or not? And that is a true. So AskPass is always true in case of a network automation world. Now, host key checking. Now, I'm pretty sure you guys have performed SSH onto the host sometime, right? Whenever you perform SSH on any of the hosts for the first time, have you noticed that it asks you to verify a fingerprint and it asks you for a yes or a no first?
Yes.
Right? So, to remove that, to not ask that particular prompt, we disable that. So, we define host key checking, ignore. So Ansible doesn't even check for that host key. It ignores it entirely. Okay. And the final step in the default section is inventory, which means what is the default path of the inventory. Now, in your guided exercise, you will also be defining one more entry. I'll explain that tomorrow, but you will also be defining gathering equals to false. Just define it and I'll explain the meaning of this tomorrow, not today. Now, privilege escalation. Now, have you guys ever created a user on a Cisco device? I'm not talking about Radius, guys. I'm talking about a Cisco device. Anyone?
Yes, we created.
And have you guys ever seen that it has priorities like between 0 to 15? 0 is the highest and 15 is the lowest.
Yes.
Yes.
Right?
It's other way around, right? It's
Oh, sorry,
15
my
is
bad.
the highest.
Yeah, 15 is the highest, 0 is the lowest. So if you have a user with a priority, let's say 5, he cannot perform many functions, right? You can surely take a look in the documentations of Cisco for that. What are not allowed operations if you have the 5 priority user? Then to escalate to a user who might have 15 priority, how would you do that? That is where privilege escalation section comes into the picture. In our lab, we don't have a user with a low priority. We only have it directly with a what do we call this? With a 15 priority. But if you have low priority users, then you can do this. First, you can define become false because by default, we don't want it to escalate the privilege. Become method on a network device generally is called enable. Become user, whoever it is with the highest priority you can define over here. And do you want to define the password at the time of changing the user? It depends again on your configuration, the way you have defined it. But in a network world, it is generally true. Does these 4 settings make any sense, guys? Guys, is this clear? Is this understandable?
Yes.
Yes,
That's
yes.
fine.
Great. And finally, persistent connection. Now, command timeout is generally what we define as 180 seconds. Means if you're running a command and if the command is not responding, time it out after 3 minutes. The next timeout is 100 seconds, and to retry once, it is again 100 seconds. Okay, so this is a retry one. That's what you are defining over here. 100 seconds. So this is how your configuration file really looks like in a production environment. But again, you might not even have privilege escalation because you might have the user with the highest priority. It depends on the situation which you're having. So we discussed about that you can define multiple configurations, and the default configuration file is etc.ansible.cfg. Now, one very important thing, that misspelled section names, like the section name is called defaults. If you define a wrong section name like default, it will be ignored. So defining the section name correct is a mandatory requirement, and defining the entry name correct is also a mandatory requirement. Which configuration file should you choose? We have discussed all the 4 precedences here. Recommended practices, as I discussed before, you can use version control. You can store your config file in a version control system, and you can even define the path of the inventory in your config file like this. Which config file should you choose? It will be defined by Ansible -- version, and it will tell you which config file it is reading at this stage. Some settings, we have discussed about the sections which are inside the config file. We have discussed about key informations like the ones which I have explained to you right now. And the settings about the connections and the commonly modified settings. I have just covered all these settings for you. Sample custom configuration. I just explained all these settings a few minutes ago by creating a new config file for you. Now, configuring some authentication details, escalating privilege levels. These are some of the things which we'll be talking about. So we already have discussed about this. Like when we talk about the privilege escalation, we have defined a privilege escalation section, and we have defined all the settings inside that. Now, this is talking about the connection. The default connection for Ansible is smart. Smart means use SSH first, and if it doesn't work, use Paramiko SSH. Okay, but these both of these are Linux connections. Okay. So, should you choose the smart or not? The answer is not, because for a network device, the connection cannot be used as smart or these. You have to choose between one of these 3. So smart is default, which I just explained, SSH first and Paramiko SSH if the SSH doesn't work. Explicit SSH, instead of smart, you can explicitly define SSH, or you can use the non-SSH connection plugins like Network CLI, Netcons, HTTP API. Using the local connection method as well. So for a Linux machine, we also have a local connection. Local means run the task locally. This only works for the Linux machine. Is somebody trying to ask a question? Hello? Hello? If you're asking something, I think your voice is breaking extensively. Is it possible for you to write the question in the chat, please? Hello? Is somebody trying to ask a question, or is it just mics on and Whose mic is on first of all?
I think
Randhir, are you trying to ask
Raj,
a question? Randhir, as I mentioned before, your voice is breaking extensively. Is it possible for you to write the question in the chat so I can answer if you're trying to ask a question? Okay, so as there is no question in the chat, I'm gonna mute everyone first of all. Okay, everybody's muted. Great. So I think there are no questions as such for now, and we can continue on this. Okay, as we just have discussed about the local connection method over here. Now here it is talking about the network connection. So we have already discussed about network CLI and netconf. So when we talk about thing between a network CLI and netconf, it is simple. Network CLI allows you to create a SSH connection over a CLI shell where all the commands will be passed and it will be running on the host. On the netconf side, it provides you a persistent connection which provides you kind of a SSH netconf using a SSH netconf subsystem, and which helps you in sending and receiving the RPC calls. Now, when you talk about the performance over here, always netconf will be much faster because it provides you what do we call this, a persistent connection. But again, the network underscore CLI is the extensively supported method, and netconf is not available on many of the devices. So everyone I have seen, they generally rely on network underscore CLI rather than netconf, even though it provides you a persistent connection, but the challenge becomes higher when it is not even available, right? Now, to improvise the performance more, we rely on the forks and the serials settings here. So play performance depends on two things. One of them is forks. It defines that how many hosts a single task can be executed parallelly. Okay, so let's say you have 3 tasks and you have 20 hosts. So task 1 will be executed on how many hosts parallelly. So this is what is defined by the forks value. This can be defined in config file or on CLI. Okay. Now, this completely depends. This fork settings completely depends on the memory and CPU. So one fork on the control node requires 100 MB of memory, 100 MB of free memory. Okay. So depending on your free memory, you should define the number of forks, but also one CPU can only run maximum of 4 forks. So depending on how many CPUs do you have available, calculate the value of forks, depending on the resource available, calculate the value of forks, and then define the value. Does this make sense, guys? What is forks here?
Yes.
Now, on the other side, serial defines that defines that on how many hosts, or let's say how many maximum hosts a entire play should run on. That is what is defined by Fox. This is generally to implement the scenarios of rolling update or the rolling upgrade scenarios. Okay, by default the value of forks is by default the value of serials is 0. Talk about the default value is 5. Okay, this can be defined only on play level using serial attribute. Okay, this is only defined on the play level using the serial attribute. The default value is 0. This is used to implement rolling update or rolling deployment scenarios. For example, total number of hosts are 100. If you define serial equals to 10, then one entire play will execute on 10 hosts max. So the same play will run now 10 times. So that means a single play will be converted into 10 plays and then it will run. Does this make sense, guys?
Rajat, when you say play, is the playbook, is it?
Yes, inside the playbook.
Okay.
So I will show you when we write the playbook in the next chapter, right? So I'll show you practically on how we can define this.
Rajat, when you mentioned here, one play will execute on 10 hosts max.
Right, because the serial value is 0. Sorry, serial value is 10.
So when you are saying serial 10, right? So this is not running in multi-threaded environment, right? Or is
Why
it?
not?
I mean,
Means the
when you are,
multi-threading depends on the forks parameter, right?
yeah. So suppose I have set the Fox parameter to 1, okay, and
Forks to be 1, okay?
you have mentioned here serial to be 10.
Right, but why would you define forks to be 1?
Suppose that some of my requirement is that the task is mutually, I mean, they are not that it requires a lock to be there that at maximum one host should run.
So in
No,
that case, you should define serial 1 and not forks.
so
See, what
no,
happens is
yeah.
forks is just running the task in a parallel manner, okay?
Mm-hmm.
That means one task should execute on how many parallel hosts?
Yes,
Okay?
yes, yeah,
Okay, so you have that kind of a requirement. But
yes.
still the challenge is that fork's job is just to run depending on the resources, not on how many hosts. When you said that your job is to lock it on a single host, okay?
Yeah.
That should still be defined by serial because that's the job of serial. If you say that my job should be locked on only one host, that should be serial 1, not forks 1. Forks is just to control the amount of memory and nothing else.
Yes, so if suppose I think I have framed my question wrongly. So
Okay.
suppose my task is memory centric, okay, memory bound. It's
Okay.
memory bound task. So
Okay.
suppose if I am taking it as a one at the fork end, and I am giving a serial a maximum value of suppose say 2 or 3. So
Serial to
in
be
that,
3 and forks to be
yes,
1. Okay.
1, yeah. So at that point of time, will at a single time only one host will run, right?
Nope. So
Even if
what
the
will
serial,
happen is,
yeah.
what will happen in this scenario is, and let's say Ansible has 3 tasks.
Uh-huh.
So let me create it as a diagram so it will become much clearer to you. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is a control node. This is managed host 1, 2, 3. Okay. Let's say
Yes.
4 and 5. 5 managed hosts, 3 tasks, 1, 2, and 3. In this scenario, we are defining forks to be 1, serial to be 3. Logically, this is what Ansible will do. Okay, it will take a maximum host of 3 in a single execution. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when playbook will start running, the first task has to execute on all 3 nodes because that's what is defined by serial. Okay. But first task, because of forks, will execute on 1 over here, successfully done, then over here, successfully done, then over here. Then like
Mm-hmm.
this. Does it make sense?
Yes. So serial is just controlling the number of tasks that will be done in sequential order.
Number of hosts, the maximum number of hosts where the entire play will run on.
Okay. Okay.
That is fork, no? Not,
Yeah,
No.
the sequential part is forks, but defining the maximum host where the entire task should run, that is serial.
Yeah,
okay.
but you have defined serial to be 3, right? That is not giving us the serial order. So serial order is of the host
No,
that
no,
will be
no.
picked is the
Serial
same
is
as
not the
inventory file.
serialization order. Just understand the concept here. Serial is not compared anything to serialization order. This is just the name of the keyword. That's all.
Okay.
Does it make sense? Don't compare it with the serialization part. Serialization is different.
Okay.
So
Okay?
Rajat, in that
Means the
case, you
sequential is
if
different. This is serialization, yes. This is serialization and not sequential. Sequential execution is about the task. In which order the
Yeah,
task runs.
yeah, but that sequential order we have already controlled by Fox, right? Because we have restricted it to run
Okay.
on a single thread.
Let me explain this again if you are confused. Sequential means in which sequence the task should run. Okay? Sequential is in what sequence task should run. Okay? By default, or forget about by default, it is always top to bottom. This is about the task execution. Does this make sense? What do we mean by serial execution here? Sequential execution here?
Okay.
Sequential means which task will run when. So first will run once it is completed, then second will run once it is completed, then third will run. That is the
Yes.
sequential order. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Forks defines parallelization.
Yes.
Defined by forks parameter and controls on how many hosts a single task should run parallelly. And this completely depends upon CPU and memory resources on control node. Okay? So let's say if I have 4 GB of memory, that means I can run 40 forks. But if I have 4 CPUs, then I can run 16 forks. So the maximum value of forks will be only 16. Does this make sense?
Yes, yes.
Means one single task will run on 16 hosts parallelly, can run on 16 hosts parallelly if there are 16 hosts. Okay? Now,
Yes.
the third keyword is serialization. Now, this is defined by serial controls on how many maximum hosts a entire play should run on. Okay? So when I defined serial 3, so without serial 3, this was it, and the task, because of forks 16, the task was going to run on all the hosts parallelly because I only have 5. 5 is anyways less than 16. But when I said forks to be 3, sorry, serials to be 3 here, virtually Ansible will divide that whatever number of hosts you have, inside a single block, you should only have 3 hosts maximum. Okay, means your entire play should run only on 3 hosts max. And out of those 3 hosts, you can run parallelly on all 3, a single task. But let's say if you reduce this forks number to 2, that means parallelly on 2, parallelly on 1, parallelly on 2, parallelly on 1, parallelly on 2, parallelly on 1. Does this make sense?
Yeah,
Yes.
it makes
So,
sense.
so you are saying, basically when you are defining this value of CL to be 3, right? So when based upon the number of hosts, it will create something like batches of 3, right?
Exactly. But if I already have less than 3, then
Yeah.
this value won't really matter at all.
Okay.
If I already have only 3 hosts, and if I'm defining a logical batch to be 3, then it is same. If it is less than 3, then it is fine. But if it is more than 3, in our case 5, the logical batch is only of 3 hosts
3, 3. Yeah.
max.
And Rajat, this serialization um, would completely disregard the grouping or nesting, whatever we would have done in the inventory file, right? If it is serial equals to 3, it will pick first 3 devices from the inventory and it will run
Exactly.
the tasks.
But that order can also be changed. And for that, there is a different keyword.
Okay.
Okay, by default, the default order is inventory, means when I say 3, that means the top 3 from the inventory. Okay?
Okay.
Guys, any other questions here?
No, it's clear.
Okay. Now, guys, on basis of this, we will be having a guided exercise for us to perform. This is configuring Ansible. This guided exercise is on the page number 39. Total duration to perform this exercise will not be more than 15 minutes. Guys, but let me show you by performing this exercise first and follow what I am showing you right now. Okay? So take a look at this. First of all, it will ask you to create a ansible.cfg. Okay, the first step is to create a ansible.cfg. So vim ansible.cfg, and now you have to define what is given in the book. So you will create a defaults section, and inside that you will define host key checking to be false. You'll define inventory to be the file inventory. You will define ask pass to be true, and you will also define gathering equals to explicit. You will also create a persistent connection where you will define command timeout to be 180, connect timeout to be 100, and connect retry timeout to be 100. Done. Okay, guys, remember in your book, there are some lines which are starting with the hash as well. You can ignore them. You don't have to define them. Remember, just define the remaining ones. Okay, so this is how your configuration file should look like. And once you will do Ansible -- version, Ansible should be able to read that config file of yours. Once now this is done, you have to create a group variable. So mkdir group underscore vads. Now I know that we haven't studied group variables yet. Don't worry, as I said, there are some things which have been done in advance. So you have to just do that, and we will learn that later. Now you have to create a file called network, and here you have to define Ansible underscore connection to be network underscore CLI. As I said, we will be defining it as a variable. This is what the variable is, where we are defining it. Okay, we will understand this in the third chapter, that will be tomorrow morning. Right now your job is just to define it. And now you will also be creating in the group pairs a file called iOS. You will be defining Ansible underscore network underscore OS to be iOS, and Ansible underscore user to be admin. And now you'll be creating for iOS Ansible network OS to be iOS and Ansible user to be iOS, and save it. Done. Once you have done that, now you will be running Ansible -m debug -a var equals to Ansible underscore user for iOS. Define the password student, and for iOS, define the password iOS. Done. So if you are able to see the variables in a correct way, then it is completely fine. Now, to test the authentication, you have to run Ansible -m ping iOS. The password is student. If it gives you a pong back, that means your connection is successful. And when you do it with iOS, the password is iOS. And now if you get a pong back from each of those devices, your connection is successful. So this is fine. Now it is asking you to download a playbook and run it. So in the book, the wget command is written as wget and a backslash. So don't do that. Just run the whole command at once. So wget http materials.example.com/playbooks --verify access.yaml. Now, what this playbook is really doing right now is it is running the ping module for you, registering the output and showing you the output and verifying if the ping response is pong. Though I'm pretty sure you might not be able to understand the whole thing right now, but that's completely fine. You just have to run it by limiting the execution on -l. So the limiting execution can be done using -l to limit the execution. And don't worry, we will be understanding that later as well. Define the password student, and this should do the job. So you got a pong back and all the assertions passed because of it. Now the similar thing you have to do with iOS to download a new playbook first, which is show current access pairs.yaml. So what this is doing, this is just printing some variables out, like what is the connection type, what is the network OS, user, and a stitch password. Now you have to run this playbook on the YOS device. Okay, so -L YOS and define the password YOS. And you will be able to see this information for every single host of the YOS. If you're able to see this much of information, that is all you have to do. Remember, I will explain about the playbooks, ad hoc commands, the ping module and everything in the coming chapter in next 15 minutes. Okay, so for now, just perform this and then we will continue with the understanding of the playbooks and the ad hoc commands. So let's get started. I'm starting a 15 minutes timer, guys. Let's get started with the guided exercise which I've given in the chat. The page number is 39. This exercise is getting finished at page number 45. Okay? Pages 39 to 45. Let's finish this. Thank you. And guys, I'll be back just in another 5 minutes. I just have to give some medicines to my mom. Thank you.
Hello, Rajat.
Okay, guys, so the time is up here. Please type it back in the chat if please type done in the chat if you are done. I will help you, Sunil, just in a minute. Okay, guys. So welcome back. I hope you have completed your guided exercise over here. Some of you have some problems I can see in the chat, and let me help you in resolving it. How about the screen? So let me help Jackie first. How about the screen of the result? Result just looks like the way it is showing in the book. So if you're able to match the outcome, what is coming on my screen and what is in the book, I think you should be okay. Does that help, Jackie? No worries. So let me help starting Sunil on the top over here. So Sunil had the first issue, which I can see. Jackie, I'll come back to you in a minute if it is not resolved for you. So Jackie was not, sorry, Sunil was not able to create the network file inside. So let me look for Sunil's lab and see what is the current stat.
Actually, I created the group and the file, but unable to authenticate.
No worries, we'll figure it out. So first I'll verify your inventory. Spine looks good. At Ansible.cfg, default host C. First of all, that's a problem here. As I said, the spellings must always be correct. So host key checking, not check-in.
Okay.
That was the first time. One timeout, connect to it. Right timeout looks good. The patch directory is okay. And iOS, Ansible Network OS, Ansible is okay. Ansible connection looks good. iOS looks good. For iOS, the password is iOS. Okay, it's working perfectly.
Okay.
For iOS, the password is student, which is working perfectly. Okay, yeah, it's working perfectly. Okay, you can continue further.
Okay.
Sunil's issue is done. Okay, it's done. Okay, Vijay Pal was facing some issues. Vijay, can you mute yourself and let me know if you're still facing it or if you're done with it?
Yeah, I'm facing.
You're still facing. Okay, I'm logging into your system then. I'll remove
Another second one.
Yeah, so we just need one opening it all over here. So first of all, remove one. You have to create a config file over here. You don't have to modify the default file. So this will be defaults, inventory equals to inventory, host the checking equals to false, as true, and gathering equals to false. Or explicit? What was it?
Sorry,
Yeah, one of them is fine.
sorry.
Explicit. And now over here you have to create first.
Redhat,
And yes,
can we check what was the issue Vijay was facing? I think he said he's facing some issue while creating the file itself.
I think it's resolved already. We just saw Vijay's system, right? He created the file. Okay?
It was Sunil's system.
Oh, okay. This is Vijay's system, right?
Yeah, that's mine.
Yeah, I'm on Vijay's system right now. So he created
Okay.
things in the wrong directory. I'm creating at the right path.
Makes sense. Yeah, thanks.
Connect, retry, timeout, 100. So Vijay, for you, this file is created now. Now you have to create a group ads directory. This directory does not exist. Okay. Once you create the directory, then only you can create files, which is network, where you will define the Ansible connection to be network underscore CLI. You will create iOS. You will define Ansible user. Okay. Net and network OS to be iOS and Ansible underscore user to be admin. Can somebody give? And in group paths, iOS, Ansible network OS to be iOS and Ansible user to be iOS. So I have created all the files for you, Vijay. Now you have to start working from the step number 5.1. Okay?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So Vijay issue is closed. Webber is done. Okay, Jackie, do you need any help? Do you want me to log into your system? Jackie, do you want me to log into your system and see what is the issue? Thank you. The system. I'm logging in right now. Okay, so this output looks correct. Something is wrong over here. Ansible playbook failed to pass the inventory. So your inventory is wrong a bit. So you must have leaves, you must have spines, you still don't have other iOS groups, and that's the problem. So you must have iOS children, and you must have cloud services inside it. And then you also must have the servers, not server, servers. There you go. Now, if you will try this, it will work perfectly. There we go. Does this make sense? Okay, this was running before, so let's run this one, which is this. Yeah, okay, this did run. There we go. So I think, Jackie, for you it is resolved. Does this make sense? What was missing? I'll take that as a yes in that case. Who's next?
So basically, we must copy the host from the Ansible folder to the home student folder first, right? Or no?
Sorry.
My Ansible still error. For the host, we must copy from the Ansible folder first to the student document
Automation,
folder.
network automation, cloud. Sorry, are you facing some issue like Damar?
Yeah.
Okay, let me log into system, Damar. And let's see what is the issue exactly you're facing first. Okay, so your host pattern must match to something which is defined in the inventory. Okay, and you don't have to run sudo at all. Ansible can be executed with a local user. So let's verify our inventory first. So you have to sit in your project directory first, okay? And then run any Ansible command. But again, you don't have your inventory here. Oh, okay. Your inventory is defined as host, which is wrong. So rm-rf host that ansible.cfg defaults inventory host week checking looks good. Okay. So you did not create this inventory file here. So spine 0102 leaks 0102. Oops. Then cloud services 201 iOS children cloud services iOS children leaves finds network children iOS servers server 123. There we go. So that group paths network looks okay. iOS looks okay. iOS looks okay. So yeah, now your configuration is good. Now you can try running the commands.
Oh, okay. I missed the inventory one.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Hey Rajat,
Yes, please.
I'm getting 5.8 exercise failed actually. I'm not getting output actually.
Okay,
Cat
who's this?
space flow current exercise stress bar dot yml.
Sorry, who's facing the issue?
Vijaypal.
Vijay. Okay, yeah, I can log into system Vijay. Let's see what is the issue here. Have you downloaded the file? You haven't. Did you executed the command before to that to duplicate the file?
Yes. I it was saved into my system actually on the machine.
I don't see you have executing the other command of duplicate. It is step number
This one,
5.7.
wget.
Yeah,
On
5.7 also
when
has another duplicate command.
but I put it actually if you can see on the say 1.175
Right.
wget.
That's a different duplicate, right? There are two
Okay,
duplicate commands. So you did not execute 5.7, Vijay.
okay,
Take a
let me
look.
check.
This file is just verify access. The other file which I'm asking you to download on step number 5.7 is show current access paths. These are two separate files.
Okay. It's 5.7. Okay.
Were you able to find it?
Yeah, 5.7, right?
Yes. Please go ahead and execute it, and then 5.8 will work perfectly. Were you able to execute that, Vijay?
Yes, I executed 5.7. It's might be taking some time. It's showing 100% now, so let me check another one. But 5.8 is still failed actually.
Then your 5.7 did not work successfully. Ah, okay.
I go
It did work, but you have downloaded two files now. So this one is not your 5.8. Ansible command is your 5.8, right? This one is your 5.8. Sorry, not even this one. The 5.8, you still have to run it again, right? Like this, you have to run
okay,
the command manually. There you go. It's gonna run successfully this time. But
okay,
now this
okay.
time your inventory is failing. So you have your config file. Where is, okay, inventory, wait, hold on. There you go. It's done.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Okay. So guys, this exercise is done here. Right. Okay, so we just completed this exercise. Now we'll do the lab and we'll finish it off. So guys, I'm just running a few commands. Just follow my cue over here. To create a directory, we'll run mkdir proj. We copy our inventory file, Ansible CFG, and the group vats file directory into the proj. If you have done this, then cd proj. So guys, you have to execute these three commands from my screen. You don't have to do anything else. Just execute these three commands: mkdir proj, copy all the three files and folders into this, and go inside the proj directory. And that's all. So guys, within the next 4 minutes, we will get started with the next one. Please make sure that in the meantime, you're finished with this much.
Uh, Rajat, what commands did you run after copy? Group
Just this
virus?
one. So let me run the history command. And these are the only three commands which you guys have to run. Nothing else.
Check.
96, 97, and 98. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay, guys, so time for us to get started further. I hope all of you have reached here. Can you guys let me know if any of you are still pending anywhere? Vaibhav, I will, as I mentioned that we haven't understood anything about playbooks yet. In chapter number 2, when we will be understanding everything about playbooks, I'll show you how to write one, how I'll show you how to understand the output, see it, modify it as per your needs, everything. Right now, it is just covered as a guided exercise to test a few settings, but we are not understanding that over here. Does that help?
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
But I will make sure that I'll explain it in the chapter number 2 because that is the main goal of that chapter, right? So in chapter number 2, you will also notice that we use variables, but I'll not explain variables in chapter 2. I'll explain that in chapter 3. So if you remember, I explained this to everyone in the morning, which was that, there will be some of the things which are covered earlier than explained, but will be explained when they will be covered as a part of the training. So that in that case, it will become more effective. Right now, we just have to rely on the exact output which we are able to see. Okay?
Yep, sure.
Thank you so much for the understanding there. Okay, so guys, as we are done with the exercises, everything, any questions so far? I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has. Anyone at all? Okay, so I will consider that nobody has any questions and everybody's okay to move on to the next one here. So in that case, we will be getting started with chapter number 2 for us. So guys, chapter number 2 is where you will learn about ad hoc commands. Chapter number 2 is where you will learn about playbooks as well from scratch. So chapter 2, running commands and plays. The goal of this chapter is to run automated tasks on the devices using plays and ad hoc commands. The objectives of this chapter is to learn how we can run an ad hoc command, understand the modules. We will also write a playbook from scratch and we will run it, but one playbook with one play with one task. Then we will be defining a single playbook with multiple tasks. And then we will be defining a complex playbook with multiple plays, multiple tasks, and advanced play operations. Shall we get started?
Yes.
Yes.
Right. Thank you so much, guys. So let's get started with the first one, which is Ansible ad hoc commands, executing the ad hoc commands here. Now, when we talk about executing an ad hoc command, what is an ad hoc command, right? And what is the format of it? So an ad hoc command is one of execution task that does not need to get executed again. So, guys, can you give me an example of which task in your organization you just runs once and you might not need to do that every time? Can anybody think of something like this? Guys, even if you're wrong, that's fine, but think something. Okay, then I'll give an example if nobody wants to give any inputs. Something when we run for test. For example, I have configured a routing. I want to verify what is the current routing table's configuration is. I should run as an ad hoc command rather than creating a playbook for that, right? So when we want to run the tasks which performs verification kind of jobs for us, or any task which we want to run manually, that is where this comes into the picture. What is the format of an ad hoc command? Format looks like this. Starts with Ansible, always, because it provides you the ad hoc command. Then options in the middle, and then the mandatory information, which is the host pattern. So I'll put it in this kind of a bracket. Okay, so host patterns. Now, options, one of the options you already have seen, list hosts, which help you in listing the host. Another option which you might have already seen is the -I to provide the path of your inventory file. There are many other options which can easily be found by just running --help. But the most common ones would be -M and define the module name, and -A to define the module option. Okay, so how do we figure out what are all the module names available to us? Okay, so how do we figure out which all modules are available to us? That's pretty easy to find. You can simply run ansible-doc-l. I am pretty sure you guys remember this since morning. If I press enter, it will list every single module which is there. Right? So you can see there is a big list of modules. Now, if you want to run on Cisco, now we know that Cisco's OS is iOS. So I can look for anything which starts with iOS _. So it will provide me all the modules which I can run on a Cisco iOS device. Okay, these are all the modules which I can run on an iOS system. If I want to work with iOS, then iOS modules to look for anything which starts with iOS. Okay, so this way you can figure out every single module which there is. But there is a most common module which we execute before we run anything else. That is the ping module. Okay, it starts with ping and it ends with ping. So the caret defines the start, the dollar defines the end. Okay, it will show you. Okay, it's not listing this. So let's try anything which starts with ping. Oh, my bad. Yeah, I forgot to define the pipe over there. Nope. There we go. So we've got a ping module right here, right? The job of this ping module is to, let me reduce the size of the screen first. It will try to connect to a host and verify if the usable Python is available and return Pong on success. Now we know that the network device does not have Python. And we also know the way execution happens on a network automation, in a network automation world, that is done all via local executions, right? So ping module is used for one and only one purpose: to authenticate to the network device, verify if the host is up, credentials are correct, and we get to see if everything is okay, right? If Python is available. But in the case of network automation, we just verify if the host is up and credentials are correct. One of this question which was asked to me previously, and the answer is this. This is how you get to know if the host is really up or not. So Ansible-m ping, if I want to check if CS01 is up or not, I can check with CS01. If I define the correct password, it will go ahead and log into that device. If it is able to log in successfully, it will get you a Pong back. Remember, the ping module over here does not send the ICMP echo packets or does not receive the ICMP echo reply. Means this is not doing the job the way ping command does. Okay, so be very careful in understanding this. Okay.
Rajat,
Now, yes, please.
is module and the playbook is different?
It is. So, playbook I'll explain in some time, but module is the actual piece of code which performs the task. Does this make sense?
Can I say
So,
playbook is combination of multiple module?
not really. So let me just explain it for a second. A playbook is a simple text file written in YAML. Okay, YAML is the format. Now, what is YAML? We'll understand in a minute. Inside a playbook, we write a collection of plays, one or more plays. Okay, the job of a play is to define the target host, or the host pattern, where the task has to run. Inside a play, we define tasks. What job do we want to do? And to run the task, we call a module. For running one task, we call one module. And module is the piece of code that performs the action. Task is the definition of job. Okay, task is just defining what do I want to do. But the module is the actual piece of code which does that job for you, right? So you can compare it like that you run a command, right, to perform a job. So a module is just like a command, but better. Does this make sense?
Yes.
So this is what the module which we are looking for. To perform a task, we want to call a module. And this task definition which you see, it is what ad hoc command I'm running right here. Ad hoc command is just one task at a time. Remember, for one task, you can only call one module. You can never call two modules. Okay? Right. Now, there surely are other modules as well available. Now, for example, right now we have just verified the connectivity between the control node and the managed host, the device which we want to perform automation. But what if I want to check if my Cisco device is able to reach some IP address, like, ping, which I want to run on Cisco. For that, there is a module called iOS_ping. So Ansible -iOS ping is the module which I'm looking for, but I don't know how to use this. And for that exactly, we will be opening the documentation for the module. Now, whenever you don't know how to use a module, always open the documentation. The simplest command is Ansible-doc, and then the module name. Press enter. On the left-hand side, you'll find the name of the module. On the right-hand side or in the middle of the screen, you'll find the path where the code of this module is available. Remember, the modules are written in Python programming language. This is the basic job, what exactly it will do. And here are the options. Okay, these are the module options which you can use. Just like commands have commands options, modules also have modules options. Okay, if I scroll it down, the mandatory option is this. How do I know it is mandatory? Because the option says any option with equals to in front is a mandatory one. So to ping a host, we need the host IP or the host name, right? Means the destination which we want to ping. Now, if you will notice the provider option here, it is deprecated, means nobody will be able to use, you should not use it because the functionality is deprecated. Other functionalities are available. You can even define the source name, the state, VRF if you want to do. So Ansible-M iOS ping is the module name. To define the option, we can use -a where the destination is 172.25.250.254 or let's say 250.8. So the IP address which I want to ping from that Cisco device, which is CS01. So with Ansible, this is the way you can do it. Ansible will tell you what command it is running. So on the Cisco device, it is going and it is running this command. I'm pretty sure you guys can identify this command pretty easily. Does this make sense?
Yes. Sorry, the -a is for what option?
The module options, which we just saw in the documentations, right?
Oh, okay.
So those module options can be defined in the space separated format, like the option equals to value space, another option equals to value, like that.
Mm-hmm.
Does it make sense?
Yes.
And if you want to provide more than one options, it's just
that's what I just said, right? The comma form, the space
comma format.
Space? No, not the comma, the space. Space.
Okay.
The option equals to whatever value it is. Again, another option, then option equals to value.
Okay.
Now, let's say you want to run a command on a Cisco device. To run a command on a Cisco device, now I don't know the module, so I'm going to do listing of the module, grep anything which starts with iOS underscore. It will show me a list of all the modules there is. I want to run a command. Let's say show IP interface brief is a command, and we have a module called iOS command. Now, I have no idea how to use this module. Step one, always open the documentation. Ansible-doc iOS underscore command. Now remember, these are the module options, and any module option which might have equals to, it's mandatory. Other are optional, but it depends on what you are defining. So if you will notice, the commands option has a equals in front, means it is the mandatory option for you to define. Provider is deprecated. Other options are not mandatory. So the way I will use it is Ansible-M iOS underscore command -a commands equals to show IP interface brief on CS01. And you will notice the basic output of show IP interface brief command is being printed over here. Does this make any sense?
Yep.
So this is how we perform one task at a time. Now, if you want to automate this, like if you want to run multiple tasks, that's when you need playbooks. And that will be the next step which you'll be learning. Make sense? I hope this is clear.
Yes, it is clear.
Right. So now we'll be performing the guided exercise over here to understand this. Now, this is the ad hoc command from the previous chapter which we just learned, right? So at least ad hoc is clear to everyone. That's what I hope. Now, playbook we'll learn now, and the variables we'll be learning tomorrow. So guys, the guided exercise is this, executing the ad hoc command. This guided exercise is on the page number 54, and the duration which it will take is not more than 10 minutes because we are just executing some basic commands over here. Let's get started with this, but also immediately after that, we will be taking a lunch break. Sorry, another tea break. The tea break will be there for 15 minutes all in all. So guys, I'm starting a 25 minutes timer, and then we will come back and then we will continue with the next section. I'm just going downstairs for 2-3 minutes to give my mom another medicine, and I'll be back. Okay, so in the meantime, finish the lab, finish your lunch break, sorry, another tea break, and I'll be seeing you back in next few minutes. Thank you.
Outro. Break period.
Okay, guys. So the time is up. Can you please type done and back in the chat if you are done? And if you're back, okay. Okay. How about others, guys? Great. So, guys, let's get started with understanding of writing these playbooks now. So, guys, I hope you are able to understand what is an ad hoc command, what is a module, what are they really doing in the entire execution cycle over here. Okay, and as we have just seen, a ad hoc command is just a one-off command where it will allow us to run one task at a time and no more. Now, if I want to run multiple tasks, that is where we need a playbook. And the next step which we'll be talking about is writing Ansible playbooks from scratch. So, as we just have discussed, though I was going to do this discussion when we came over here, but now we are going to talk about the playbooks here. What is an Ansible playbook? A playbook is a simple text file which is written in the YAML format. Okay, a simple text file written in YAML. We'll talk about YAML in just a minute. But inside a playbook, we will write a play. A play is the entity inside a play which defines the target host or the host pattern, means where all the tasks will really run. That is what a play is. Now, to define what exactly I want, that is where the task comes in. The tasks define what do I want to do. And to do that, the task calls a module. Module is the actual piece of code which will perform the action for us. So how does a play look like and what is YAML and all that? That is what I'm going to cover for every one of you right now. So some rules of writing a playbook. Okay, as we know, first of all, a play is written in YAML, right? So the full form of YAML itself is YAML ain't markup language. YAML. It means that YAML is not a markup language. Okay. So the question generally comes, what is YAML then if it's not a markup language? So what is a markup language? HTML is a markup language, hypertext markup language, right? HTML or any other markup languages generally have some hard things like, the starting textures, the ending textures, like, HTML, head, title, break, this, that, and many of the elements which are mandatory for us to define. YAML surely has some elements, but all of them are entirely optional. That's why the full form of YAML is YAML ain't markup language. Now, the only two things which you really need to understand in order to write a play is list and dictionaries. YAML is only about these two things. Oops. Lists and dictionaries. So let's say if I want to write a list of fruit items. So a list always starts with a dash, followed by a space, a single space, and then the value. For example, apple. Apple is a fruit, right? And a dash, mango. A dash, banana. Each single dash followed by a single space followed by whatever the type of value is what we call a list. I hope this makes sense to everyone. Now, if I have to do the same thing and write a fruit items in the format of a dictionary. So a dictionary of fruit items. A dictionary in YAML always follows the pattern key without a space, a colon, following by a space, a value. So key value pair it is. So it's going to look like this. Fruit 1, apple. Fruit 2, banana. Fruit 3, mango. Does this make sense, guys? How do we define a list and a dictionary? Any questions so far?
No. No.
Okay. Now, just for your explanation, a list can contain its value in the format of a dictionary. And on the other hand, a dictionary can contain its values in the format of a list. That's completely possible. So a list can contain data in the format of a dictionary. On the other hand, a dictionary can contain data in the format of a list. Now, some rules of writing playbooks. First, we will talk a little bit about YAML specific rules. Okay, this applies on every single YAML file. First rule, a YAML file optionally starts with 3 dashes. 1, 2, 3. Okay? It represents the starting of a YAML file. Okay, so the 3 dashes on the top, though it is completely optional, you can define it for the best practice, but are not mandatory, and they represents the starting of a YAML file. The second rule, a YAML file optionally ends with 3 dots. 1, 2, 3. No more, no less, okay? Just 3 dots. It represents the ending of a YAML file. Again, completely optional, but this is what it represents. Now the third rule. Data structure is defined using white spaces. Remember, white spaces and not tab spaces. These white spaces are called indentation. Best indentation is to define two spaces. Now, this is nothing but a best practice. This is not mandatory. Okay, so the best indentation is to just define two spaces, not more. Now we will talk about some play-related rules. So these were YAML rules which apply on every single YAML file which you will create with Ansible. Sorry, which you will create anywhere you want in the world with any of the products. Okay?
So Rajat, one question.
Yep.
The indentation is mandatory, but how many spaces, white spaces we use is
Not
optional.
mandatory.
It's 2 spaces is a best practice, but we can
Exactly.
use like 3 or something.
You can use 1, you can use 3, you can use 8, you can use 100. It's up to you.
But indentation is mandatory, right?
Indentation is mandatory to define the data structure. Like this is the parent, this is the child, this is the child's child, like that.
Makes sense.
Right?
Okay.
So to differentiate between which data is parent and which data is child, we have to define indentation. The best practice is to define 2 spaces, which is compact and easily identifiable. But some people use 4, some people use 8. It depends on person to person or the organization's best practice. Does this make sense, guys?
Yes.
Yep, it does.
Right. Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about playbook rules. Now these apply specifically to, let me not write playbook rules. Let me write Ansible rules. These are applied on everything in Ansible, like either it can be a playbook, it can be a task file, it can be a role, it can be anything, right? So the first rule is individual data elements must have the same indentation. Like, when I mentioned just a minute ago about the parent elements, right? So if you define multiple elements on play level, they will have the same indentation. If you define multiple child element, they will have the same indentation. So multiple elements which are individual to each other, they will have the same indentation at the end of the day. But when you talk about child elements must have more indentation than the parents. Okay, so the child element will have more extra 2 spaces comparing to the parent to define that, okay, this is the child of this parent. Consider this is the playbook. When you start, you can start with 3 dashes. This is your playbook. Now remember, this is a YAML file, so a playbook can have extension .yml. Any YAML files can have extension .yml or .yaml. The popular one is YML. Okay, a playbook is a list of play. A list is represented by the dash followed by a space, and this is what your is play level. So generally the play level attributes you will define over here. And what is a play? A play is a task, is a collection of tasks. So inside the play, every single task will start with a dash. So let's say this is a task. Then here is another task. So this is what we call the task level. So the task will go inside the play. If there is another play, it will start on the same level as the first play, which is this. Does this gives you an idea, guys, what is the play level and what is the task level here?
Yes.
Now you will see some common elements of your play or the task levels. Okay. So let me show you by writing a simple playbook. But before we go ahead and write a playbook, let me tell you a couple of more things. A list is also known as scalar. Okay, and a dictionary is also known as a map. So these are some keywords which you should remember for anything. So let me go ahead and create a playbook for you guys here. So as I'm already sitting in my project directory, I can create a simple playbook.yml here. I'll press enter. A play starts with 3 dashes, as you have noticed already. A playbook starts with 3 dashes. A play is a list, right? So a dash followed by a space. Now you have to define some play level elements or the play level attributes. Okay. The most common attribute is the name. Name is a completely optional attribute. A name can be defined to a play, to a task, to a role, even to a block. And you will learn all these things by chapter number 3. Okay. Right now, because I'm defining the name attribute on the play level, this will define the name of this play. So let's say this is my first test play. Now, a play is going to run on a target host. So there is a parameter called hosts, which is mandatory. Okay. Hosts is the mandatory parameter on a play because that defines what is my target host. So let's say my target host is CS01. Remember, we can define any host pattern over here, which we have learned in the previous discussion. To run the tasks, we have the keyword tasks. And inside the task, now we have to define our task. So remember, the task which we are going to write, they are the children of the task keyword. So you can either start further 2 steps or you can exactly start over here. Remember, the dash does not matter for the indentation. What matters is the first keyword. The first keyword is the name, so this is going to define the name of the task. So you notice this indentation, right? So this is the indentation which I'm talking about. The name is inside the task, which is representing that this task is a child of the task keyword. Or you can do like this if you want. So let's say authenticating to the host. Now, on a task level, one of the mandatory thing is the module name. Because without the module name, how would you run a task? So this is how we define a module name. This module does not require any option by default to run. Now to write another task, again, another task will be another list. So a name. Let's say ping 172.25.250.8. If you remember the module name, it was iOS_ping. Now, to ping a host, we had a module option destination or the dest. Remember, the dest is the module option, means it is a child of the module name. That's why you will notice the indentation over here. And the destination is 172.25.250.8. Does this make sense, guys?
Yep.
And to end the playbook, 3 dots. Again, completely optional, but it's up to you. Does this make sense? Now, we define the name so that we can print it out on the screen at the time of running the job so that it becomes easier for a human to understand what the particular task or what the particular play is doing. Okay? If I do not define the name of the play, the host, the target host or the host pattern will be printed in its place. If I do not define the name of the task, the module name will be printed. But if you notice, the module name and the target host does not explain anything. And that's why we define a name following the best practices. So defining a name, again, it's not mandatory, and it is kind of important for us to work with. Does this make sense?
Yep.
Great. I will save it now. Now, before I run the playbook, what is the most important thing to verify if my syntax is correct, right? So I'll run Ansible-playbook, syntax-check, and the playbook name. This is the inbuilt feature for Ansible playbooks to verify the playbook syntax. Remember, this only verifies the playbook syntax and nothing else. Okay? I'll press enter, and if the syntax is right, it will give me a OK. After doing a syntax check, the next step is to verify if the code which we have written will be able to execute or not. So like to perform a test run. In Ansible, we call it a dry run. That can be done using the -- check. We still need to define the password for the target host. Our target host is CS01, whose password is student. So I've typed student and press enter. Now you see the job is running. If you will notice, it has successfully authenticated to the host, and it was going to ping the host, but it skipped. Why it skipped, I'll explain in a minute. So if you'll notice, it is telling that it is executing the play, and it is printing the play name. As I said, if you do not define the name of the play, the host pattern will be printed over here. Then the first task which you have defined and the name of the task. If you do not define the task name, then it will be printing the. If you do not define the task name, what will it print? The module name, right? And here is the another task with the name of the task in brackets over here. Now the -- check just do a dry run, means it only checks what is the current state of the host and verifies it with the desired state, what is defined in the playbook. Let's say you have defined a task to create a user on the device, right? So what if the user doesn't exist? So that is what we are saying, that checking the current state of the host to the desired state. But dry run is just about to check it, but not making any permanent changes. So this just verifies and comes back and provides us the result. But if anything has to change, it will not perform the changes right now because we are just doing a test run. Does this make sense?
Yes, it does. We are using this functionality to check the device compliance with reference configuration.
With the playbook which we have written.
Yeah. So in
Exactly.
the playbook, we reference to a standard set of configuration.
Exactly.
And so this is like a very good feature that we could make use of.
Completely. See, in a production environment, nobody runs a playbook without doing a check run. Otherwise, there are chances of something to get fail or something to modify something in a way which will bring your network infrastructure down. And I'm pretty sure you guys understand the cruciality, what do we say that word? The crucial element about network going down means if a server is down, only the application is down, but everything else is still working. Maybe you might have another set of hosts which can perform some operation for you, right? But if the network is down, maybe the whole set of applications, everything can go down, correct? And that is why we can do a -- check, which is a target host execution. Does it make sense, guys? Any questions so far?
Nope.
Now, if you see the recap over here, the recap
Sorry,
is
just one question.
Mhm.
What if we did not have the ping module used in this playbook? It will just directly run the iOS ping and it will skip
will.
it, right?
It will.
Yeah, okay.
See, ping module is just a sample which I'm showing you right now. In a production environment, you never run ping module other than using it as an ad hoc command. Means if I have verified with the ad hoc command if my host is up, why do I need to put that in a playbook, which will reduce my performance in a production environment?
Yes, understand that.
Right? Right. So, Weber, I have a question for you. Are you able to understand the output this time of a playbook?
Yep.
That's why I said, means if we go in a sequence, I know some topics would come earlier, but I'll make sure that you understand all of these. All of you understand all of those things, as in when we reach to a particular topic. Now, some of you don't might not have that Ansible experience up in advance, which again, we don't need that. But if you don't have it, just wait. And by the end of chapter 4, the whole Ansible you'll be able to understand with your eyes closed. Okay, any questions so far, guys? Okay, so as there are no further questions, we have just run it in the check mode, and I was just going to explain you the recap over here. Recap is shown per host. It shows that on a host, how many tasks were successfully executed. Out of all of the tasks which are listed to, only one task got executed. No tasks has made any changes yet. None of the hosts were unreachable, and none of the task has failed yet. To actually execute the playbook, pretty easy. Ansible dash playbook and the playbook, and then define the password, which is student. Press enter and done. See, the task has been executed. The task has been executed, and this time OK is true. Does this make sense?
Yes.
Right. Now, as you have seen, I have covered already how we can write a play with a single task and with multiple tasks. Let me bring a couple of more things over here so that it can become much easier for you guys. So we can perform, a couple of exercises together. So other than these options, we do have a few other options. Like if you remember, in the configuration file, we had an option called transport, which allows us to define the connection type. Though we have defined that using a variable, we can still define it using in the playbook itself. So in the playbook, this is not called transport. The setting is called connection. And here we can define the connection type called network CLI. We do have other options here as well. We can define remote user. We can define become. We can define become method. We can define become user, etc. So this way we have a lot of options which we can define and modify the value which are defined in your configuration file for all the plays, then to a play, right? So for this play, I want to run this play with these settings. This might overwrite your configuration file settings. So the order of precedence works like that. The order of configuration precedence. So first of all, any configuration which is defined in Ansible config file will apply. If you want to overwrite the settings which are defined in config file, you can define it on the CLI as a CLI option. So when you run an ad hoc command or a playbook, you can define the CLI option and it will do the job. But even if you want to override this more further than this, it's completely possible by defining it as a play attribute, the one which I just showed you. If you want to overwrite a play attribute for a particular task, that can be done as well with a task attribute. If you want to overwrite all of those, then it can be defined with a variable. So this is the order of precedence which really happens on if the same setting has been defined at multiple places, which will really apply. Any questions so far here, guys?
So, say I had written a similar playbook for leaves and spines in our example, right? And in the playbook, I use hosts as a VYOS group. But if on the CLI, if I specify a specific host,
Right.
the play will still run on all members of the VYOS group, right? Because in the play, I had used that inventory item or host value as VYOS.
Actually, that's not possible. We cannot define a target host if we are running a playbook on a CLI. If you're running an ad hoc command, only then you can define the target host on the CLI. But while running a playbook, we cannot define a target host on the CLI.
In form of inventory, we can still do that, right?
But that's an inventory, right? Inventory is just a file which provides you a list of hosts on which you can run a task, but it doesn't choose one for you. You still have to choose from your playbook only, right? So if you want to override the inventory, you're not defining inventory file in the playbook, right? You're defining it in the configuration file. So between config file and the CLI option, the CLI option will win. Yes.
No, not in between config file and CLI option. I'm talking about CLI option versus the play attributes.
Right. So
for the
if,
inventory items.
but you cannot define inventory inside the play ever. There is nothing for that.
We are specifying the hosts in the play, right?
See, you have two things. You have to understand this. Inventory is a different component. Defining the target host or what we call the host pattern is a different component. You can define a host pattern inside the playbook and then run. Okay. But if you're running a playbook, you cannot define host pattern on CLI. So that's gone. Now, if you talk about inventory, you can define inventory on the CLI, but you do not define inventory inside the playbook.
No, I understand that. I understand that, right? So let
There
me
is no
take an
comparison
example.
left, right?
Yes, I understand that. But let me take an example, right? So we have our main inventory file where we have created the
And where do
structure
you define that?
in the project directory. We have the inventory file.
Right. Okay.
Now, in that we have everything like leaves and spines and CS01 and all the groups and nesting that we have done, right? It's our main inventory file.
Yep.
Now I have I created another inventory file, say inventory file 1.
Okay.
And in that I use only say lif01, nothing else.
Got it.
Right. And now while I am running the playbook, right, I am specifying -I inventory 1. Right.
Got
so
it.
I'm targeting that specific inventory, the new inventory that I have created just for lif01.
Okay.
Okay. But while writing the play, right, in the hosts parameter, I would have put VYOS.
Okay.
So would it?
It will throw you error.
Okay, that's what I wanted to understand.
Right. It will throw you error because the target inventory file which you are choosing, right, it doesn't have any VYOS entry.
Makes sense. Okay. But it will not fall back to the other inventory file and try to run it, right? It should throw it. Okay.
Ansible doesn't even know about other inventory file. Remember, if Ansible loads something, right, it will only load one thing at a time. One config file, one inventory. There is nothing to fall back on.
That makes sense. Yep.
Right? Ansible doesn't have a concept of falling to something else other than the connection which is defined by smart. Other than the method of copying the content, there is no way of falling back on something. So yes, you're correct right now. Make sense?
Yep.
Great. Guys, anybody else? Any other questions so far? Okay, so as there are no further questions, let me provide you a link where every single play, task, role, or block attribute exists. So you have to just Google Ansible keywords. And the first link itself is providing you every single keyword which exists. Right here it is. So every single keyword which you can use, now there are a lot of keywords, remember. So you should be really comfortable in understanding every single one of those. So let me type all playbook keywords. There you go. This is the place where you'll find all the keywords. Now, talking a little about the older format, or you can say the shorthand format. So a play can be written in two formats. One is what we call a block format. A playbook can be written in two formats. One, the block format, also known as the longhand format. And second, the flow format. This is what we call the shorthand format. Okay, the basic difference between both formats is pretty simple. So I'm going to write the task number 2 in both the formats. So the one which you see over here, this is what we call the block format, where every single thing is in a single line. The one which is the shorthand format is this. You write the module and the module options in a single line with an equals to format like this. If there are other options, then space option equals to value like this. So this is what we call a shorthand format. Does this make sense? Right. Next is, if you have multi-line data, multi-line strings, you can define them as well. So let's say like this. So if you have a description which is big, which you want to define in multiple lines, you can still work with that. The way you can work with that is by defining in 3 lines, but in front of name, you can have either a pipe or a greater than sign. A pipe allows you to write the content in multiple lines, and it will also print the content at the time of running in multiple lines only, which will look a little bit weird. See, over here, it looks a bit weird. On the other hand, if you type a greater than sign instead of a pipe, it will also allow you to write the content in 3 lines. But at the time of execution, it will convert the data in a single line, which looks much better. Notice this? See, the content is now inside a single line. So it depends which one do you want and how do you want it. And Ansible will do that for you. Generally, as we have already understood the output over here, just let me show you the color coding as well. Color coding of output. Green means successful execution. Without any change. Okay. Yellow means successful execution. with some changes. Purple means some kind of warning. Red means error. And you also have a color called sky blue, which means successful execution, but task skipping means the task did not run. So the task was successful, but the job did not run, whatever was defined inside that. So that was a skipping the task. Make sense? Is this understandable, guys? Yep. Okay. Now, there are some additional options which you can look at other than check and dash dash syntax check. Ansible dash playbook, the playbook name. You can also do list tasks. So you can list tasks, whatever are defined inside it. You can also do list hosts. So it will define that this is the current pattern defined and these are the hosts where the job will actually execute upon. I hope this makes sense. Guys, now if you have got any questions for me, I'm ready to take it. Let's go through the slides once. We have understood what was a task. We have understood a playbook. We have seen a playbook by creating one from scratch. To understand YAML, we have understood all these rules and regulations. I have written it. I will send you guys an email today as soon as the training is over with the whiteboard which we are creating. The block style and the flow style, as you can see, this is a single object. This is a list. This is a dictionary. Remember, a single object we don't define really. A list is also known as, what did we call it before, guys? Scalars. A list is also known as scalars, and a dictionary is also known as map. A similar thing it is explaining. This is a dictionary item inside which there is a list. A dictionary item inside which there is a list. There is a list inside which there is a dictionary item. So as I said, a list can have a dictionary can have a list. A dictionary which has a dictionary inside it. That is also possible. Okay, we have understood the flow style and the block style. We have encoding the plays in YAML, where we have discussed about these rules. What is the task? What is the play? How do we define it? Mapping the terrain, and we have created a play with that. So this is what a play looks like with a single task. We have discussed ping or iOS ping module. A ping is just to authenticate to the host. A iOS ping is to, what do we call it? To ping from a Cisco device to something else. Again, it is explaining the same difference. Running the iOS ping as an ad hoc command, we have already done that. Running iOS ping in a playbook, we have already done that as well. And now we will be doing this guided exercise, but we have also completed this section here, building a play with multiple tasks. Here we have discussed about the connection method. I have just explained all these attributes plus more. Local execution of a Python code, we have already discussed all of this. Shorthand and the longhand method, we have just discussed both of these things just a couple of minutes ago. Longhand and shorthand sequence, we just talked about it as well. The list, the dictionary, etc. Sequence of mappings, again, as you can see, sequence of mappings, right? So a dictionary of a list. Also known as sequences. I haven't defined that yet. Scalar or sequence. Right? What else? Multi-line string, we just have discussed the pipe or the greater than sign. Guessing what happens, the output. They are just listing 3 basic colors. I have covered a couple of more. Understanding the output, we have understood it. Now there is a gathering fact section as well, which we'll be talking about tomorrow. Executing the playbook, we have discussed all these options and how do we execute a playbook and see the output. Power plays, where we can define a single play with multiple tasks. We have done that. And an exercise. So guys, now we will be having back-to-back 2 guided exercises for us to perform. First guided exercise is on the page number 60 with a duration of 15 minutes. And the second guided exercise is to build a play with multiple tasks. This guided exercise is on the page number 67. And that will take around 10 minutes. Let's make it 15 minutes. 15 minutes. So guys, we have 2 exercises to go through. That is 30 minutes. Let's get started with both of them. I'm starting a 30 minutes timer now. Let's get started on the exercises, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Dika.
Hey Rajat, Rajat, am I audible?
Hey Jackie, are you there?
Rajat, it was Vijaypal. I just tried to perform the lab one. I created the playbook while I'm trying to just run a command check syntax. It got failed actually.
Hello? Hey Jackie, can you hear me? Okay. So Vijay, just give me a minute to answer your question. Let me answer Jackie's question first. So Jackie, as you've asked, can we run a config mode command using iOS command? No, that's not possible. iOS command only allows you to run the command mode command, or you can say the user mode commands. To run a config mode command, you have iOS underscore config module, which we'll be learning tomorrow. Uh, we'll set up a lot of configuration starting tomorrow, so that's where we'll be learning that. Okay? Now, Vijay, I'm going to access your system right now. So, Vijay, if you have followed the rules and regulations which I have mentioned, and if you followed the study guides, it should have worked. Okay, yeah, I think the syntax problem is not with your playbook, it is with the space. The option is dash dash syntax check together. And now you don't have an iOS ping 1. I think you have created ansible.yaml file. Yep. So, Vijay, why are you not creating the file names which are mentioned in the question itself?
I created a iOS ping one as well later.
Oh, you did not. The file doesn't exist, right? I just moved the file name over here. If you do syntax check right now syntax check have a problem, and now we have to look what is the problem here. And if you notice, I always said a dash is always followed by a single space, not two spaces. Now this looks correct syntax. This should be okay this time. Now you can continue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rajat,
Okay. Hello. Yes, please.
yeah, Rajat, can you please access my machine? I'm getting some error in the debug space. Can you check?
Who's
I was
this?
testing VYOS show config YAML file.
Sorry, who is this? Who's facing the issue?
Web
Redhat.
of, yeah.
Okay, it's pretty easy. See, you're given an extra space. The name and the debug cannot have this. The debug is not a child of name here, right?
Okay.
Module name is also going to be on the same level as the task name. Now it looks good. And here the problem is with the register. The register is a task level keyword. The task level. This is the module option, okay? This is the task. Now your syntax should be okay. There you go.
Okay, thank you.
Please continue.
Hey there, Nick Attack is here. In this video, let's talk
Thank you, Rashid. Mohammed, for the confirmation. There is a question from Rashid though. Would it overwrite previous backup if I run iOS checks one playbook multiple times? Answer is yes, it will. Though we will understand the technicalities, how does it takes the backup and how does it override the backup later in the course. But answer to your question is yes, it will overwrite the previous backups taken.
Okay, and ignore that cd dot dot. I was trying to do it on console.
No worries. No worries.
By mistake, did it here.
No problem, Rashid. That's completely fine. So, for guys, anybody who has completed the exercise, this is the end of the day. If you are done, if you do not have any questions, you are free to log out. And I'll see you tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. IST.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. Have a great day.
All right, thank you, Redhat.
Okay, guys, hold on. Anybody from Malaysia, Indonesia, and Hong Kong, just wait for a second. I have day one feedback for you guys. I received it from the iVersion system. I think this is actually only for the Malaysian candidates, but I think you guys would know better than me on this one. This is from the iVersion feedback system. And I think this is only for the Malaysian candidates because the website says iversion.com.my. Is that correct? Or does it apply for the Indonesian candidates?
स्पेस का इशू रहता है इंडेंटेशन हाँ वही विमेरिटर उसमें होता है शायद क्या कहते हैं
So day one feedback for Malaysian participants. For participants from Malaysia. Guys, if you're from Malaysia, you gotta fill that. Now, just give me a minute. I'm gonna call the technical manager here to verify that if it applies for the Indonesian people or the Hong Kong people right now or not. Just give me 1 minute for that. But anybody from Malaysia, you have to fill that feedback out.
23
And the time is up for the exercise.
23 कहीं स्पेस का होगा 23